How would you feel if you were sitting in a busy New York subway on a Saturday afternoon when someone comes out of nowhere and pushes a stranger onto the subway tracks? The train comes through and eventually strikes that person dead. Hi, I'm Larry Thomas, and I'm a nursing student at the University of Wisconsin-Manitowoc who has a sub-interest in psychological diseases, mental health, and mental well-being. Today, we're here to discuss the potential of mandatory mental health treatments in a public safety setting. We've all been exposed through news stories and personal life stories of tragedies such as these listed here, in which multiple casualties have been led because of mental health diseases that were untreated and later found to be significant problems. Today, I'd like to discuss the mandatory illness treatments through discussions of the demographical information, physiological changes that take place in the body, as well as discussing the potential for the mandatory treatment. Let's start with some background information on mental illnesses. 26.2% of the adults in the United States have a mental illness, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. And of that 26.2%, about 5.9% are considered serious. Those serious mental illnesses will be discussed here in just a moment, and we'll go through the backgrounds on those. And as you can see by the chart here on the display, the majority of all of our prison inmates suffer from mental illness according to the Department of Justice. The serious mental illnesses that we will focus on today are post-traumatic stress disorder, which you'll find in a lot of our military vets who have been through traumatic and stressful situations, and it affects about 8% of the general US population. Secondarily, there'll be borderline personality disorder, which is a random mental health disease that affects about 1 to 2% of the general population. And the most serious mental health that we'll discuss today is schizophrenia. It affects about 0.7% of the general US population, and according to the US Census in 2016, the US population was about 322 million and some change. So you can do the math and figure out how many mental illnesses are out there. The question is, are we safe with these people? About 4.3% of murders, according to a Harvard study done in 2006, stated that all murders were committed by people with serious mental illnesses. And of those people, schizophrenics were responsible for 8.5% of all violent crimes in the US. That involves assault, rape, and murders. And most of us who were alive in 1999 are tremendously familiar with the Columbine situation. This situation left 12 students dead in a Colorado high school, in which 27 were additionally injured by gunfire. However, what most folks don't know is, according to psychiatrist Frank Ochberg, the two suspects were considered to be psychopaths, and their initial plan was not to shoot people, it was to plant a bomb within the school and kill 600 people who attended the high school. But, now that we know the information regarding the background, what do we know that's happening inside of us? Here, my friend Johnny Depp shows how crazy can be. The first thing we'll focus on is post-traumatic stress disorder that affects about 8%. What happens here is there's a hyperarousal of our brains. And as you can see here, in the scans of the brain, there's differences that take place in the cerebellum that help change cognitive awarenesses. It makes them sensitive to noises that happen within the surroundings of them in public settings. They actually have exaggerated responses that cause them to react as if they were back in the war field, such as fireworks can cause them to think that gunshots and bombs are going off. They also will have flashbacks and safeties in settings that are actually safe, but they feel that they are in danger. It can actually cause them to react in significant violent manners and will actually attack people unannounced. Borderline personality disorder is a mental health illness that has unintended reactions to fears, such as rage, depression, and anxiety that can last for hours. But these aren't triggered, they just randomly happen. They'll have outbursts of violence, they're known to strike people for no reason whatsoever, but unfortunately, they can't make sense of things, so they have a tremendously high level of suicide. And as we discussed earlier, the most significant mental illness that we'll discuss today is schizophrenia. The symptoms can actually fester within their brains for long periods of time prior to them actually acting weird in public settings. It affects their thoughts, their actions, and even their feelings. they can actually hallucinate things in public settings that will actually lead them to violence for no reason that anybody else can see. So now that we know what's happening within their brains, let's discuss possibly how this mandatory treatment can happen. This policy would be affected through public safety officers such as police officers, paramedics, and firefighters who deal with public safety on a daily basis. They would actually pull people over, whether it's in a car or on the street, who are acting suspicious, such as this wonderful gentleman in China who is brushing his teeth in his boxers standing in the middle of rush hour. Obviously suspicious. They would also do something similar to a field sobriety test, such as a drunk driver would, to assess them for mental health issues. How it would work is somebody who is suspected of having a mental health issue would be held for 24 hours, where a mental health professional would evaluate the suspect for possible mental health issues. If they had a positive test, meaning they did have a suspected mental illness that was untreated, they would be held in one form or another to be assessed through treatments. If they were negative and found to be normal, just acting weird, they'd be released without incident, no charges. Of the mandated treatments, some of the possibilities would be outpatient oral medications applied through a physician, group counseling through a local setting, or possibly inpatient treatment that can last as much as 28 days for severe cases of mental illness in which they are jeopardizing public safety. Now, let's go back to that opening statement. Is it real or is it false? Unfortunately, this photo is real. Somebody was forced onto the tracks, according to the New York Times in 2016, for no reason by somebody suffering from schizophrenia and was killed. Now, New York City does prove that mandatory treatment works. In 1999, there was a similar situation where someone was pushed onto the tracks and killed for no reason whatsoever, and they initiated something called the Kendra Law. It's a law in which a judge can involuntarily admit a patient into a mental health treatment session. But what's great about this is statistics from that law have proven that suspects are 4 times less likely to react violently after being released, and readmissions are essentially cut in half by those who got mandated mental illness treatment for those who didn't know they had it. Also, from a financial standpoint, it saves public tax dollars because there's less public safety work for reactions to things that may not exist, and there's less jail and treatment costs for those who are being imprisoned for things that they can't control. So, things to consider today are, does a state of mind of somebody who is impaired because of mental health influence the justification of them being free on the streets? And does an individual have the right to react violently? Just because they have a mental illness, does that make it okay for them to strike out on people? And one other thing to justify is, can people who are doing copycat crimes without mental health be found to be innocent? I don't think so. So let's review. This policy won't be accepted by everyone. I completely get it. We're jeopardizing rights of people. But can you accept it if it saves the life of a loved one? We have discussed today that there is a direct link between all of the mental illnesses to outbursts of violence that can lead to murders. Would you consider this as an option if your family member were the one who actually got killed in the subway? I appreciate your time today. I'll stick around for just a few moments if you have questions.